Hello, welcome back to the studio for another Friday at 3 live session. I can already see some questions starting to pour in. We'll let a few more build up. I can start off by addressing one that I wasn't able to answer last time, but I think I can now. He was asking me about a 2007 CBR 600RR, and he was referencing the way the front brake rotors were assembled, and that they basically are what they call floating type rotors. That means there's not a direct connection in between the outside of the rotor and the inner hub, and they're basically held in place by these rivets, and I believe there's some rubber in there as well to kind of hold them in place. And he was concerned that the rivets were able to turn, and he wanted to know if that's a problem. Well, they're supposed to move somewhat, and when I say some, I mean just a very little bit. I mean, if they're moving any more than a half to a full millimeter, or if they're moving more than a millimeter, that tells me that they need to be replaced. But they're going to have a little bit of give in there, so a little bit of movement's okay. And if there's a lot of slop, more than a millimeter, then I think you got a problem and you need to go ahead and replace them. All right, guys, let's take a look at what all we've got coming through. Beat you to it. Thank God it's Friday. Yes, indeed. I'm glad it's Friday. It's been a long week. JP asked me, can we have some fun and do a legit mini bike build? Well, we did one on a Honda Grom. What was that? Gosh, 2 years ago already. It was pretty in-depth. Is there something else you were looking for? Maybe a different machine for us to look at? Because we are considering doing another build and then giving it away when we're done. So tell me what you're looking for, and maybe we can make it happen. All right, Paul's asking me, thinking about a 2010 Suzuki ATV. Thought the name was Ozark or something to that effect on the tank. Well, when I try to find it, all that will come up is the King Quad. The King Quad is the main number, kind of like, TRX. I mean, that's just an overreaching name, and there should have been a submodel called an Ozark. I think that was actually a 250 if memory serves. All right, calm down. The screen's jumping all over the place. All right, Zayed is asking me, how many hours till I change the Honda TRX90 oil? Well, that one's a little bit tricky because it doesn't have any type of hour meter, so you're pretty much having to just log your time as to how much you're riding it. I would need to do that because it's only a quart. I would say about every 40 to 50 hours. So if you take it out for 10 weekends in a row, it's probably time to go ahead and change that oil, and don't forget to take care of your air filter as well. If you do those two things, those little TRX90s will run forever. Now, I do know that it was Yamaha that actually made an hour meter, and the way it operated, it was battery operated, but it basically, you wrapped a coil around the ignition lead that went to the spark plug, and it will keep up with the time on it. So you may want to investigate maybe getting one of those. That way you can be sure that you're changing it at the correct intervals. Yeah, and my guys down in Florida said yes, the 2009 LT-F250 Ozark. And that is an ATV made by Suzuki. Shouldn't be a big problem finding them. Cal, if you would drop that over in the comment section, that way he can find his parts for it, or know which model that he's talking about. All right. Steve is asking me, he's got an 06 YFZ 450. Is it normal for the oil in the reservoir tank to drink back into the crankcase? It's been sitting for 2 weeks, obviously too cold to ride in my neck of the woods. Thanks, John. Yes, over time it is going to drain down into the crankcase. That's why it's very specific when you're actually checking the oil level in there. It has to run for X amount of time and sit for X amount of time, and then you check it, because that's just indigenous to a dry sump system. So yes, it is quite common for that tank, the reservoir tank, to empty down into the crankcase. Nothing going wrong, it's doing what it's supposed to do. All right, Northern Ontario is asking me, hey John, curious what a bad rectifier caused dash light issues and no ES available. If it's overcharged, if it's letting too much voltage go through, yes, it could be affecting your display. The quickest way to find out if it's doing what it's supposed to do is crank it up, put a volt to ohm meter on it, and see if it's reading anything north of 14.5 volts. If it's going past that, yeah, you've got an issue. So do a voltage test on it with it running, rev it up a couple of times to make sure it's not getting out of control. But certainly a bad rectifier could mess with the electronics, particularly in the control unit display and the electronic shift. So yes, it's possible. All right, Paul's asking me on that 2004 Bruin, now that both ways to start engine work, sounds good, but now oil burns on the startup, but it quits. All right, that's more than likely going to be your valve stem seals, because more than likely it's just all the oil that's on the top of the engine is just running down those valve seals and getting into your intake. When you start it up, it burns that off and eventually it clears up. So I'm betting on seals on your valves. Kay is asking me, 2014 S1000RR had a hard knock in it. Took apart cylinder number 1 and it's completely damaged. Don't really know that much about boring. How much would it cost to get it rebored? Well, more than likely, the real trick on that one is it's going to be nickel plated more than likely. So you can't just do a standard bore and pop a piston in there, new piston and rings. You could get it bored and then you'd have to send it off to get it plated, replated with that Nicosil or whatever type of coating that cylinder may have on it. We went through that process when we built that R6 a few years ago. We took it from a 600cc up to a 636 kit using a piston kit from Wiseco. So go back and reference that video and see which supplier I went to get it replated. It can be done, but it's a little costly. Okay, Syed said, I have an hour meter. Good. And I was changing it every 8 hours. You probably don't need to change that often. I'd say you could probably go to 40 or so. But I mean, if it makes you feel more comfortable changing it every 8, I'm not going to stop you. I mean, oil's cheap. Engine parts are expensive. And not to mention the labor to take them apart and then put it back together. All right, also battery melts when turned on. I even tried a new battery. Whew, I'm not sure which conversation that came from, but yeah, you've got a charging issue. All right, Savage is asking me why C450, it turns up, it doesn't fire. Any suggestions? Well, that leads a lot of things that we need to look at. I mean, if it just spins over, I mean, there's 3 things it's got to have. It's going to have fuel and air, a compression, and a spark to go boom. So just start eliminating those variables. Check to see if it's getting a spark, make sure it's getting fuel, and then do a compression test to make sure it's got an adequate compression to actually go boom. So lots of testing needs to be done. Hey John, what's your thoughts on the 2021 Hayabusa? Whew, that is going to be a mean machine. God, that Hayabusa's been around forever, and they basically haven't changed it for the better part of a couple of decades now. So I know everybody's going to be all over it. It's completely up to date. They're really getting involved with what they call an intelligent riding system. It's got all kind of sensors to where it knows what type of, well, who's actually riding it, and it adapts accordingly. I mean, it is going to be a very advanced machine. Now, have I had a chance to swing a leg over it yet? Not yet, but when one shows up at the dealership, I may just have to test ride it, because it is going to be leaps and bounds ahead of its predecessor. But honestly, it was time. And when and if I ever ride it, maybe I'll do a, I don't know, little impromptu riding survey and maybe put on a GoPro or so and take it for a spin, then report back on it. Oh, all right, Steve is asking me, do you have any videos for a top end for a 2002 YZ426F? No, I don't. The only one that I'm going to have close to that is going to be the YFZ 450R we did a top end on. Does it basically go together the same way? Yes, but all your torque specs and timing and everything else is going to be completely different. So no, I haven't done one of the regular YZ 426Fs. That's an early model, but a groundbreaking machine nonetheless. Glad it's still out there running. Rednecks is asking me, Honda Rancher 350 has no power, has new battery, but melts it too. You must have a charging issue if it's cooking your battery. So as I mentioned earlier, you need to get a different machine, but get a voltmeter and put it on there and see what it's actually charging to, because it sounds like it's way overcharging it, and that's going to be a regulator rectifier. You need to get it out of there pretty quick before you melt your harness as well, or worse than that, catch it on fire. Billy's asking me a question. Hey man, question. I have a 2013 400EX and it burns oil. And what do I do if it has the correct compression? Your 400EX didn't have enough compression, so you took it down to the piston. Would it? All right, your compression, it's not the end all and be all, especially if you're burning oil. If anything, when you get oil inside of the combustion chamber, it gives you a false reading on your compression because it actually helps seal up the motor more than it should be in some aspects. So the question is, are you losing, or is oil getting there through a failed gasket, or is it getting in there through valve seals, or is it coming up through and around the piston by the O-rings not sealing up as they should? I would suggest, if you've done the compression test and it's not telling you the information that you need, to do what they call a leak down test. And I'm sure that we've done that on several machines, and you just go through that procedure and it's going to point you in the right direction as to whether it's a valve problem, a gasket problem, or a piston ring problem, and you're mainly just listening to it. So if you would reference one of those videos, and I can walk you through using a leak down tester, and I'm pretty sure we carry those on our site. So, yeah, he's covered that. Boogeyman is asking me, hey John, is all silicone spray or lube the same? I want to keep rust away from my quad, so I'm wondering if any silicone spray would work and not harm the plastic and other components. Thanks. Well, honestly, there's a bunch of different types of silicone type spray, and you need to be a little bit careful because some of it's what they call a wet type, some of it's dry type, and some of it can have chemicals that could actually blemish or damage your plastics. Now, I know there's a couple of different manufacturers that we carry, and I believe one's called SC1. It is a protectant that it really does a fantastic job of cleaning up, especially black plastic, and it protects regular plastics as well. So I think Maxima makes it, and it's called SC1. So take a look at that. Maybe consider using it. Utah's asked me, can you have low compression but have a good leak down on a new top end? Usually that will work in tandem together as far as the leak down is going to show why you have low compression. But you're saying it's a new top end, so I'm wondering if it's really broken in yet and have the rings really seated. So, but should they be contradicting each other, low compression and then a good leak down? No, it really shouldn't be happening. So usually they go hand in hand. So do a little bit more investigating, and I'd like to know the numbers in particular as far as the make, model and year, what the compression shows, and then also what type of percentage are you considering okay as far as your leak down. Because if it's more than 5% on a new engine, you got a problem. I mean, I've seen them run with leak downs up to 10, but it'll run very well. Lee is asking me another question regarding a carb on a YFC 450S. All the cylinder heads I've seen have galling the cam journals. I took some 3K grit and polished them to where the cams turn good. Will it be okay? It seems to be okay, but I don't know. Well, if you're smoothing them out that much to at least take off the edge, man, I don't see that as being a bad thing. I mean, and you put it back together and it still works. I mean, why not? I certainly wouldn't turn away and not try it. I mean, and then if it continues not to perform, well, then replace it. But go ahead and get every little last drop you can out of it. Why not? All right, Rory is asking me, hi John, I've got a 2001 Polaris Scrambler 500 Freeman edition. I'm not familiar with the Freeman edition, but I'm pretty sure the Scrambler 500, wasn't that a two-stroke? Comment below to make sure I'm right. I'm having some problems with the battery not charging. It had a new battery, but it's not charging. Could it be just be the stator? Well, chances are it's going to be your regulator rectifier. I mean, do stators and stators go out? Yeah, sometimes they do, but 90% of the time it's going to be the regulator rectifier. And it really doesn't matter which make or model. We've done several videos showing how to test a regulator rectifier. So if you would just reference one of those and go through the testing procedure and see what you've got. I mean, the simplest way is just start off with a voltmeter again and then see what she's actually outputting at the battery when you've got the machine running. You'll do a static test before you crank it up. It should be around 12 volts, and as you rev it up, it should go north of 13.5, maybe even to 14 volts. But I would be worried if it went past 14.2. I think you can start getting in trouble at that point. Clune is asking me, I have a 2007 TRX 250EX. Charging voltage just jumps around and it's not a consistent voltage. Check your ground. That sounds like a ground popping around. And if you're sure your ground's good, then it's once again probably pointing its finger straight at that voltage regulator rectifier. Neil's asking me, are you going to do any maintenance videos for Can-Am Maverick Sports Trails? That's the one manufacturer we haven't really dove into yet, and there's so many of them out there. I need to go ahead and get up to speed on those and start showing some maintenance videos. So yes. All right, production team, it's time for us to get in one of those machines. I've been wanting to work on one for a while anyway, so why not? All right. YK has asked me, waiting on more Rancher repair videos so I can tackle those parts from Partzilla. She's a work in progress. Although that one's going to be coming off, and we're going to continue our build series, which y'all haven't seen yet, on a 2005 CRF 450. I'm staring at it right now, and it's basically just a frame sitting over there. The engine's spread out all over the place. But that's going to be a fun build. And we're actually using a lot of Wiseco parts to put it back together. One of their Garage Buddy kits is what we zeroed in on. But yes, we are going to keep going on the Rancher. Good machines, no doubt. Zayed is asking me, what's the best oil for a TRX 90, 10W40 or 20W50? Well, it's a little bit of a loaded question. Your different weights and viscosities are usually targeted toward what the temperature is that you're riding in. If it's really cold, you want a little bit thinner oil so it circulates easier. If it's really hot, you want something a little bit thicker to where it doesn't break down so much and actually does lubricates it as it should. So that's really more of a question. What's the temperature outside as to which one's a better oil? It depends. All right, Tommy's asking me, how do you tune a carburetor on a 2003 Yamaha Bear Tracker 250? Well, my question would be, have you made any modifications to it where it would need to be tuned? Because from the factory, they're going to have it set for, the stock OEM equipment, whether it be the intake or the exhaust or a different header on it. If it is the factory setting, if it's set for factory, then that's the settings I would go back to and then adjust accordingly. And say if you're at high altitude, you may need to adjust your air-fuel ratio just a little bit. But I would say go back to the factory settings and then adjust from there. Typically, you shouldn't have to do more than the air-fuel adjustment on it to get it to idle and then set your idle speed as it should be. And I think on that machine is pretty low. I think it's like 650, maybe 700 RPMs. So I'd say if it's OEM, go back to the factory specs and then work from there to fine tune it to whatever environment that you've got it in. Utah is asking me, I just put in a new top end, and I'm getting less than 5% leak down. I have fairly low compression. How does that happen? We were just talking about that early. 5% leak down should be fine. What is the compression number? I would want to know. Give me the make, model, and year. That'll give me a better feel for what you're running up against. And once again, are you sure that it's completely broken in? I mean, we did a video, well, in my opinion, how they should be broken in. Listen, watch it and see if you went through that same procedure, because to get those rings to seat in and get the full potential out of that engine. So Utah, send me a little bit more information, your make and model, and then what the actual compression numbers are. In Z Rather from New Zealand. How's it going over there? Glad you could join us. Kendall is asking me, 2007 GSXR 600 engine swap. I recently put a 2007 750 inside of a 600 frame. Well done. The engine fits right into the frame. It cranks up, but it doesn't want to start. What am I doing wrong? What do I need to replace? Well, that's the real trick when you bring in another engine. Are you trying to use the 600 wiring harness and ECU on the 750? If that's the case, it's not going to work. So you need to bring over the associated harness and the ECU from the 750. Well, that's what it's looking for, so I'm betting that's what you're running into. There can be a bunch of different little small wires that it's looking for, or a certain sensor, or maybe even the kickstand sensor. But hopefully it'll be something simple like that. But make sure that your engine matches your harness, matches your ECU. Once you've got those three things matched up, then it's a matter of process of elimination as far as your sensors and whatnot, making sure that they're connected and or bypassed if need be to get it to fire up. Joe's asking me, he's got a 2007 CBR 600RR. Honda wants SS8 fork oil. What weight is that? And what are the plus and minuses in between the different weights? Interestingly enough, I just did a video. I don't know if we've even released it yet. It's more or less just a discussion video talking about fork oil weights. And I believe the SS8 is actually an 8 weight oil. And typically on most of your machines, you'll see 5 to 10, and it usually doesn't go beyond that. So you can go with another manufacturer as far as that particular weight. I mean, Honda may want you to put SS8 in it, but I'm pretty sure you could get away with going with like a 10 weight from a PJ or something like that. Oh, Cal tells me it is, SS8 is a 10 weight. It's nice having the guys down in Florida to send me information because I can't remember everything. Fernando, John Talley, you're the man. Thank you, sir. Okay, Jorge's asking me something in Spanish. I have a problem with a 2007 Grizzly 700. Something with the engine and temperature. Sounds like it gets too hot. All right. Couple of things you need to check is if it's just sitting there idling, is your thermostat actually triggering, is your thermostat opening up, and is your temp sensor for the fan actually turning the fan on, and does your fan actually work? And I believe we went through that particular testing procedure on a Grizzly 700. So if you would reference those videos, and I can walk you through making sure that everything's working as it's supposed to. Bam is asking me, do you have a 2008 TRX 450R top end video? Not on that particular one. The only one that I'm going to have close is we're in the middle of right now, and that's the CRF 450R that we're rebuilding from the bottom up. We're actually going all the way to the crankshaft and coming all the way up. The engine is basically the same as far as how it's put together, but some of your torque figures may be a little bit off. But to answer your question, I don't have that particular one, but I've got one close coming soon. Ali has asked me, is the 2005 ZX6R a good buy in 2021? Hey, if it's been maintained properly and not super high mileage, why not? I mean, not everybody has to have the newest, latest, and greatest. I ride older machines, and I'm pretty sure my smile is just as much as somebody on a 20 or a 21. All right, Utah is also made, would a weak cold cranking battery give the low compression reading where the leak down is good? You know, that's a good point. If it's not spinning over at the correct speed, that could be a definite possibility. I hadn't thought about that. Make sure you do have a fresh battery. A couple other things, when you're doing the compression test, are you holding the throttle open? Well, first, make sure your fuel's turned off, whatever type of machine it is, and then you want to have your throttle open. That way it's not having to overcome, you're bringing the air in through the throttle body or carburetor or whatever it is and having to fight through that plate. So to get an accurate number, you need to have the throttle plate open. So make sure you're doing that. Zai is asking me, hey, I'm from Ireland. I just bought a new Honda 420. Congratulations. I was wondering how many hours to be on it to be broke in. In my opinion, break-in happens within the first few minutes, actually, when you start running that machine. To get really everything settled in, I consider one to be completely broken in, even if it's a utility model like that, within 10 to 15 hours. I mean, so other people may say, no, it has to go 50 hours or 100 hours. No, I don't buy that. I mean, I think they want you to hold back on really hammering it for 40 to 50 hours, but I don't really subscribe to that. I give them 8 to 10 hours, riding them somewhat normal, and then I change the oil and drop the hammer. But that is just the way I run it. All right, guys. There's one more. We'll do one more. Dennis has asked me, hi, John, you talked many times about changing the oil based on runtime hours. What about time-based, like at least once a year? Oh, definitely. And I have talked about that before, particularly if you're going to set up a machine and let it sit for a long period of time. You need to change the oil before you do it, because oil actually gets dirty from contaminants within the engine in the combustion process, and that can actually have a corrosive mix down in your crankcase and do damage, believe it or not. So if you know you're going to have set up your machine for a long period of time, change your oil before. Now, once it's been changed and it's been sitting for a while, it can sit for a pretty extended amount of time. But after you start it up and then let it sit, well, then you're going to need to go ahead and change it at least every year. But if you set up a machine with fresh oil in it, you don't have to change it every year. But the moment you start one up, then you're going to have to do something about it. All right, guys, I've been speed talking for about 30 minutes now, and I'm about to call it a week because I can feel my voice starting to fade on out a little bit. Well, listen, guys, we just want to say thanks for spending some time with us and sending me some great questions. We also want to say thank you for shopping here with us at Partzilla, because it makes all of this stuff possible. And we enjoy being able to spend some time with you and doing some interaction on Fridays at 3. Well, listen, everybody have a great weekend, a great week, and then, God willing, we will see you next Friday at 3. Y'all stay safe.